The night smelled like old paper and floor polish. When I first stepped into the building, I expected silence, maybe a faint hum from the ventilation. Instead, the air felt thick, like the place had been holding its breath for years. The fluorescent lights flickered in the long hallway ahead of me, casting strange, uneven shadows. I adjusted my backpack and checked the crumpled job listing in my pocket. Night shift janitor needed. Simple tasks. Good pay. Sounded easy enough. I needed the money, and cleaning up empty offices seemed better than flipping burgers or dealing with customers. At the front desk, a security guard sat hunched over a small TV, playing some old black and white movie. He barely looked up when I walked in. "You the new guy?" he asked, his voice rough like he'd been chewing gravel. "Yeah, Brad," I said, dropping my bag on the counter. He gave a slow nod and leaned back in his chair. "Mike, night security." He waved a hand toward the hallway. "Janitor's closet is down the hall on the left. Cleaning checklists in there. Just follow the rules." His tone made me pause. "You mean company policies?" Mike's eyes flicked up to mine, and for a second, I thought he might laugh. But he didn't. Instead, he exhaled heavily and turned back to his TV. "You'll see," he muttered. Something about the way he said it sent a small shiver up my spine. I shook it off and headed down the hall. The building was bigger than I expected, the kind of corporate office that probably had hundreds of employees during the day. But at night, it was just me, Mike, and the sound of my footsteps echoing down the empty corridors. The janitor's closet was exactly where he said it would be. I flicked on a light and found a mop bucket, some cleaning supplies, and an old wooden desk pushed against the wall. Sitting on top of it was a clipboard. The checklist looked normal at first. Empty trash cans, wipe desks, mop floors. But beneath that, written in shaky red ink, was something else. Rules to follow. Read carefully. I frowned and picked up the paper. The handwriting was messy, rushed, like someone had written it in a hurry. 1. Do not use the elevators after midnight. 2. If you hear whispering in the bathroom, leave immediately. 3. Do not acknowledge the man in the break room. He is not real. 4. If you see room 401 on your checklist, ignore it. It does not exist. 5. If the lights flicker more than 3 times in a row, run. I let out a short laugh. "Okay, very funny," I muttered, shaking my head. Someone must have thought it'd be hilarious to mess with a new guy. Tossing the paper back onto the desk, I grabbed the mop bucket and headed for the nearest bathroom. It didn't take long to realize that whoever wrote those rules wasn't joking. The silence in this building is the kind that presses against your ears, making you feel like you're the only person left in the world. The hum of the fluorescent lights above me is the only sound keeping me from drowning in it. I push my mop across the cold tile floor, the faint scent of industrial cleaner mixing with something stale, something off. Mike's words from earlier echo in my head. "Follow the rules, or you won't last." His voice was too serious, too firm for it to be a joke. I shake it off. It's just a list. A stupid list. I finish mopping the hallway and glance at my reflection in the glass panel of one of the office doors. The dim light makes my face look pale, my eyes sunken. I look exhausted already, and it's only my first night. I move to the next area, the break room. As I enter, I feel it immediately. The air is different in here. Thicker. The kind of air that makes you second-guess walking into a dark room, that makes your instincts tell you to turn around. I grip my mop tighter and step inside anyway. A single vending machine hums softly in the corner, its dim light flickering. A few chairs are scattered around a small table, some pushed back like someone left in a hurry. A coffee pot sits on the counter, half filled with old, burnt coffee. It looks like any normal break room, except for that feeling. Like something is here with me, watching. I shake my head and start cleaning. I wipe the counters, sweep the floor, anything to keep my hands busy. But the feeling doesn't go away. If anything, it gets worse. The hairs on the back of my neck rise. It's that feeling you get when you know someone's standing behind you, staring. I stop wiping the counter and turn around fast, expecting to catch someone standing there. Nothing. The chairs, the vending machine, the empty room. I exhale and rub my face. I'm just being paranoid. First night jitters. I turn back to the counter to finish wiping it down, and I see it. In the reflection of the vending machine glass. A shadow. Tall. Unmoving. Right behind me. My breath catches in my throat. My fingers tighten around the cloth in my hand. I can't move. I can't breathe. The figure just stands there, its outline dark and unnatural. My mind screams at me to turn around, to run, to do something. But I remember the list. Rule 4. If you ever feel like you're being watched, do not turn around. Keep working. Act normal. A chill runs down my spine. I swallow hard and force my shaking hand to keep wiping the counter. I focus on the repetitive motion. Left to right. Left to right. My heart pounds so loud I swear it's shaking the room. The vending machine light flickers. For a split second, the reflection is gone. I blink. The shadow is back. Closer. I grip the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. I can't do this. I need to leave. Now. Taking a slow, shaky breath, I force myself to move toward the door. I keep my eyes on the floor. Don't turn around. Don't turn around. I reach the doorway. The second my foot crosses into the hallway, the weight on my chest vanishes. The air is normal again. The feeling is gone. I spin around. Nothing is there. The break room is just a normal, empty room. Mike is standing at the end of the hallway, watching me. His face is unreadable, but his eyes say everything. He knows what I just saw. You didn't turn around, did you? His voice is quiet, but there's something sharp in it. I shake my head. No. For a moment, he just stares at me. Then he nods. Good. Without another word, he turns and walks away. I stand there, heart still pounding, my hands clammy with sweat. I glance back at the break room one last time. The vending machine light flickers again, and in the reflection, just before the room goes dark, the shadow moves. I wipe the sweat off my forehead and lean on my mop handle. The office building was dead silent, except for the faint hum of the vending machine down the hall. It was almost 3 a.m., and I was exhausted. The break room was just around the corner. A 5-minute rest wouldn't hurt. I pushed the door open, expecting an empty room, but someone was sitting at the table. It caught me off guard. The guy was hunched over, his hands resting flat on the surface. His back was to me, and his head was slightly tilted down, as if he were staring at something in his lap. I frowned. I hadn't seen anyone else in the building tonight, except for Mike. Maybe it was just another late worker who had dozed off. Hey man, you okay? I asked. The man didn't move. Something felt off. The air in the break room was thick, like the ventilation had suddenly stopped working. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, flickering every few seconds. I stepped closer. Hey buddy. His fingers twitched. Slowly, his head began to turn toward me. A deep, suffocating dread settled in my chest. It was subtle at first, but as his head turned more, I realized something was wrong. Very wrong. His face was blurry, not like bad vision or a trick of the light. It was as if my brain refused to register what I was looking at, like trying to remember a dream that keeps slipping away. But the worst part, he was still turning his head, way past what should have been possible. A sharp, static-like noise filled my ears. My breathing turned shallow. I couldn't move. Then, just as his head reached an impossible angle, the break room door slammed open. Get out. Mike's voice cut through the air. Something jerked me backward. My vision blurred as I stumbled into the hallway. The door shut behind me with a deafening bang. I gasped, my heart pounding against my ribs. Mike stood in front of me, his expression grim. What the hell was that? I choked out. He didn't answer right away. He just exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. That wasn't a man, he finally said. His voice was low, almost a whisper. You just broke one of the rules, kid. My hand was shaking. But he was just sitting there. Who was he? Mike's jaw tightened. Not who. What? I turned to look at the break room door, half expecting it to burst open. But nothing happened. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Mike spoke again. Go back to work. And next time, don't acknowledge him. I wanted to ask more, demand answers, but the look in Mike's eyes stopped me. I didn't step into the break room again for the rest of the night. I shouldn't have gone looking for it. Mike warned me, more than once. The rules made it clear. Room 401 does not exist. But when I checked my cleaning schedule, there it was. Printed in plain black ink, like any other task. Room 401, mop floors, empty trash. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse picking up. Was this a mistake? Some kind of test? Mike had been sitting at his usual post, near the security monitors when I showed him the schedule. His face went pale the second he saw it. Without looking up, he shook his head. Forget you saw that, he muttered. Just skip it. I hesitated. But Listen to me, he cut in sharply. You want to make it through this job? Stick to the rules. If the list says it doesn't exist, then it doesn't. His eyes held something I hadn't seen before. Fear. That should have been enough to make me listen. But curiosity has a way of digging into you, making you reckless. I spent the next 2 hours finishing my shift, but my thoughts kept circling back to room 401. I had been through every floor of this building. I had never seen that room, and that made me want to find it even more. The door that shouldn't be there. It took me a while. I wandered through the dim hallways, following the room numbers in order. 399, 400, then a blank stretch of wall. I almost turned back. Maybe Mike was right. Maybe there was no room 401. Then the overhead lights flickered, and just like that, a door appeared. I stopped breathing. It was just there, like it had been waiting for me to notice. The number 401 was nailed to the wood in rusted brass. The doorknob looked old, scratched up like someone had tried to claw it open, or shut. My fingers twitched at my side. I knew I shouldn't. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. But my hand was already reaching out. The second my fingers touched the knob, the air changed. The hallway behind me went silent. The usual hum of the vents, the distant buzz of the exit sign, gone. It was like the entire building was holding its breath. I turned the knob and stepped inside. Something was wrong. The room was small, windowless. Dim yellow light buzzed weakly from a single overhead bulb. It smelled wrong. The air was thick, damp, almost rotting, like old wood left to decay in a locked basement. Then I saw the walls. Hundreds of employee ID badges were pinned to them, row after row, stretching from floor to ceiling. The faces on them were scratched out, deep gouges dug through the plastic. The names were faded, almost unreadable. A chill ran down my spine. I took a step closer, reaching out to touch one. The plastic was ice cold. Then I noticed the chair in the middle of the room. A simple wooden chair, old and worn, and covered in deep claw marks. My heart pounded. This was a mistake. I turned to leave, but the door was gone. Not alone. The lights flickered again. The air behind me shifted, like something was moving. I didn't turn around. My body screamed at me to run, to bolt for the wall where the door had been and pray it was still there. But my legs wouldn't move. Something was breathing in the room. Slow, raspy, right behind me. The overhead bulb flickered, casting long, twisting shadows across the scratched-up walls. The ID badges rattled, as if something unseen had brushed past them. The breath came closer, right at my neck. A voice, low, broken, whispered 2 words. Who's next? The light flickered once, twice. Then the room plunged into darkness. I should have never gone in a room 401. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. It felt thick, heavy, like stepping into a place where I wasn't supposed to be. My skin prickled, and the smell of something old and rotting filled my nose. The room was dark, but not completely. There was a single flickering light overhead, casting shadows that moved in ways they shouldn't have. I took a cautious step forward. The walls were covered in something strange, rows and rows of old employee ID badges. At first, I thought they were just random, but when I looked closer, my stomach tightened. Every single face on those badges had been scratched out. Deep, jagged lines tore through them, as if someone had violently erased their existence. A chill ran down my spine. I turned to leave. I had seen enough. That's when I noticed something in a corner of the room. A large mirror. It stood against the far wall, covered in dust, its surface cracked in places. But that wasn't what made my breath hitch in my throat. It was the reflection. I could see myself standing there, just as I should be. Same janitor uniform, same tired eyes. But something was off. My reflection wasn't perfectly still. It was breathing, too slow, too deep, its chest rising and falling in a way that didn't match mine. Then it smiled. I wasn't smiling. My breath caught in my throat. My reflection just stood there, grinning at me, its teeth slightly too white, too perfect. Then, in one smooth motion, it lifted its hand and waved. I stumbled backward. My reflection wasn't copying me anymore. It was acting on its own. The light overhead flickered, and for a second, the room was swallowed in darkness. When it came back on, my reflection was closer. I spun around, ready to bolt, but my feet felt like they were sinking into the floor. My body felt heavy, like something unseen was pushing down on me. I turned back to the mirror. My reflection was now right against the glass. Its grin stretched wider, too wide, unnatural. It tapped on the mirror. Once. Twice. A deep, distorted voice filled the room, but it didn't come from the mirror. It came from behind me. You shouldn't have broken the rules. The lights went out. I sat on the floor outside room 401, my back pressed against the cold wall. My hands were shaking. I could still hear the distant hum of the emergency lights flickering overhead. The air felt thick, like something unseen was pressing against my chest. Mike stood a few feet away, arms crossed, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. His face was pale, more than usual. He didn't say anything at first, just sighed and rubbed his temples, like he was debating whether to tell me something he wasn't supposed to. I told you to stay away from that room, he finally muttered. His voice was lower than usual, almost tired. I swallowed hard. What the hell is going on in this place, Mike? My voice came out hoarse. What was in there? Why are there ID badges with scratched-out faces? And why? I hesitated, my stomach twisting. Why did I hear something breathing behind me when I turned around? Mike didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat down beside me, leaning his head back against the wall. For the first time since I met him, he looked defeated. You think you're the first janitor to work here? He asked, staring at the ceiling. Or the first guard? The way he said it sent a chill down my spine. This place, he continued, it's not just an office. It's been here for a long time. Longer than the company. Longer than the city, probably. People come into work, thinking it's just another job. They follow the rules. They make it through the night. They don't, they vanish. A lump formed in my throat. Vanish. Mike nodded. One day, they just don't show up for their shift. No calls. No resignations. No records of them ever being employed here. Like they never existed. I shook my head, my mind refusing to accept it. That's not possible. People don't just disappear. You've already seen things that aren't possible, Mike said, his voice flat. The whispers. The security footage. Your own damn reflection, moving on its own. What makes you think this is any different? He had a point, but I still didn't want to believe it. My whole body felt like it was rejecting every word he was saying, but deep down, I knew he wasn't lying. Then what's in room 401? I asked. Where are those ID badges? Mike exhaled slowly. Those are the ones who didn't follow the rules. My stomach twisted. I wanted to laugh, to say this was all some sick joke, but I couldn't. I had seen too much already. The rules keep you safe, Mike continued. They aren't there to mess with you. They're warnings. Guidelines to survive. This building, it's hungry, Brad. And if you break too many rules, it notices you. I felt lightheaded. My hands curled into fists against the cold tile floor. So what happens now? Mike was quiet for a long time before he finally said, You need to get out of here. Tonight. His words sent a surge of relief through me, until I saw the look in his eyes. He wasn't finished. But you won't be able to, he said softly. A cold weight settled in my gut. What do you mean? Mike turned his head, looking straight down the hallway. His face was unreadable, but his fingers twitched slightly against his knee. The building doesn't let people leave once it's noticed them. I felt my breath hitch in my throat. And then, from the far end of the hallway, I saw something move. Something that looked exactly like me. I don't know what I expected to happen when I stepped out of room 401, but it sure wasn't that. I had just broken the most important rule in the damn building. And now, something was hunting me. The hallway stretched out before me, the low buzz of the fluorescent lights above doing little to comfort the pit in my stomach. It felt wrong, like the building itself had turned against me. I moved quickly, almost instinctively, wiping sweat from my palms onto my jumpsuit. I was shaking, my heart racing. I had to get out of there, but where? Every turn felt wrong. Every door leading to a place I didn't want to be. Then I saw it. At the end of the hallway, standing in front of the elevator, was me. I froze, my blood turning cold. It was me, exactly me, down to the smallest detail. The same janitor's outfit, the same tired face, the same messy hair. But there was something off. His expression was different. My expression was different. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was almost as if he knew something I didn't, like he was enjoying this sick game. I blinked, and he didn't move. I took a step back, eyes locked on him, and I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. This wasn't possible. I backed away slowly, my mind running in circles. What was I supposed to do? How had I ended up in a nightmare like this? Then the thought hit me like a freight train. The last rule. The one I had ignored earlier. The one I thought was just some crazy, made-up warning on the list. If you see yourself, do not let it reach you. I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew I wasn't about to test it. The guy in front of me didn't look like he was there to give me a friendly chat. I had to get out of there now. But the thing was, my feet wouldn't move. It was like my body had frozen in place, like I was glued to the floor. I tried to blink it away, to tell myself I was seeing things, but he was still there, standing motionless at the end of the hall, waiting. My chest tightened, and I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick. The walls felt closer. I needed to move, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from that figure. I took another step back, and that's when I heard it, the faintest sound of footsteps behind me. I spun around, my heart slamming in my chest, expecting to see Mike or some other worker who had wandered out of the shadows. But there was nothing, just the empty hallway stretching in the opposite direction. No, it wasn't nothing. I heard the soft shuffling behind me again, this time louder. He was following me. I whipped back around to face him, my pulse racing, but my doppelganger hadn't moved an inch. It was almost like he was me, frozen in time, trapped in the exact moment we were stuck in. I felt a cold chill run through me. This wasn't right. I turned and bolted. I had no idea where I was going, just that I needed to get away. My feet slapped against the floor, echoing down the hallway as I ran blindly, eyes darting between doors that all looked the same. I could feel him behind me now, that eerie presence closing in. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, he was still there, closer. I reached the stairwell and shoved open the door, nearly slamming it into the wall. The stairs were steep and narrow, winding down to the lower levels. I didn't even care where they went, as long as it was away from him. But just as I reached the first landing, the lights flickered and cut out. Total darkness. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze. The sound of my breathing was the only thing I could hear. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it at first. Brad. It was my voice, but it wasn't my voice. It was like the words had been dragged out of me by something darker, something that wasn't supposed to be here. I stumbled back, my feet tangling over each other as I fought to stay upright. Brad, it called again, this time louder, echoing through the stairwell. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, suffocating, and that whisper was closing in. I reached for the stairwell door and shoved it open, the sound of metal grinding against metal filling my ears. But when I stepped out into the next hall, it was still there. The same feeling of being watched, the same crushing weight. I wasn't free. I spun around and sprinted again, but now the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly. Each turn I made, I ended up back at the same place. The same door, the same figure. And that's when I realized I wasn't going to get out of here. Not this time. The lights flickered once more. The figure at the end of the hall grinned. And the last rule echoed in my mind. If you see yourself, do not let it reach you. But I didn't have a choice anymore. It was already too late. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered against my chest, the sound deafening in my ears as I stumbled down the dimly lit hallway. The emergency lights blinked overhead, casting long, jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. It felt like the walls were closing in, the air growing thicker with every step I took. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep running. Behind me, there was someone. My reflection. No, not just my reflection. It wasn't a mirror anymore. It was something else, something darker, something that should not exist. It smiled, and that smile was wrong. It wasn't my smile. It was wider, almost grotesque, like it wanted to eat my face. And then it started to move toward me. Slowly at first, then faster, until it was nearly on top of me. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing in the hallway, too loud, too fast. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care as long as it wasn't there. My legs burned with every step, the sweat stinging my eyes. But the hallway never ended. I kept running, but I could feel it. It was getting closer. Behind me, I could hear it. The sound of something dragging itself, scraping against the floor like nails on glass. My breath came in ragged gasps. My body screamed at me to stop, but I couldn't. I couldn't let it. It couldn't catch me. And then I saw it. The exit door. The one I'd passed 1,000 times before. The one that had always been so close, so reachable. But now it felt miles away, like some cruel trick the building was playing on me. I pushed myself harder, desperate to reach it. But the air felt heavy, thick with dread, as if the building itself was trying to hold me back. I reached the door, my hand trembling as I grabbed the handle. But the door didn't open. It was locked. I pulled harder, yanking on the handle with all the strength I had left, but it didn't budge. My panic surged, my mind racing. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. I spun around, my eyes searching for any escape, but the hallway behind me was empty. And then, there it was. The reflection. It wasn't just walking anymore. It was running, coming right at me. Its smile stretched impossibly wide, and I could hear it laughing, a low, distorted sound that sent chills straight to my bones. I stumbled back, my mind screaming for me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The hallway was too long, the walls too close. The lights flickered, and then everything went black. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place. The silence was suffocating. My pulse hammered in my ears, my breath shallow and quick. I was trapped. The rules didn't work anymore. And then, just as quickly as it had gone dark, the lights flickered back on. But the hallway wasn't the same. I turned around and found myself standing in front of the door again, the one I just tried to open. Only now it was wide open. I didn't have time to think. I bolted through it, not stopping to look back, not caring if it was a trap or not. I had to get out. But as I ran, I felt it. I was no longer alone. It was there, right behind me. I felt it before I saw it, the cold, clammy breath on my neck, the sharp sting of something close. My reflection had caught up to me. I wasn't Brad anymore. I was just a thing, running, trying to escape something that had already claimed me. I didn't know if it was the building, or the rules, or something worse. But I was trapped, and now I couldn't escape. I don't remember how I ended up here. 1 minute, I was walking to my car, and the next thing I knew, I was inside this godforsaken building. The place looked the same, almost too perfect, like a snapshot frozen in time. The same flickering lights, the same stale smell that lingered in the air. The only thing that felt different was the silence. It was heavier tonight, almost suffocating. I glanced around, waiting for the usual hum of the office machines or the distant chatter of workers, but it was just me and the building. I was told it was a simple gig. Janitor. Work the night shift, clean a few rooms, and leave. Nothing too special. I had been out of work for a while, so this job seemed like a blessing. The man who interviewed me seemed odd, though. He had this strange, almost nervous energy. His eyes darted around, like he was afraid of something lurking just out of sight. "Mike will show you the ropes," he said, handing me the keys. Mike. He was the one I was supposed to meet, the guy who'd be working the shift with me. He didn't seem too thrilled when I arrived. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I could have sworn I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, as if he'd seen this happen before. Now, here I was, standing alone in the dim light of the janitor's closet, my hands cold as I picked up the mop. The room was tight and musty. Nothing was out of place, except for the crumpled piece of paper on the top shelf, half hidden behind the cleaning supplies. It looked old, the edges yellowed with age. I pulled it down without thinking, the faint smell of dust clinging to it. The words written on it weren't exactly what I expected. Rules to follow, read carefully. The handwriting was shaky, uneven, like it was scribbled in a rush. I scanned the list, almost laughing at how ridiculous it seemed. Never clean room, 401. It doesn't exist. If you hear whispering in the bathroom, leave immediately. Do not acknowledge the man in the break room between 3 to 3:05 a.m. If you see your reflection move when you don't, run. I frowned. This had to be a joke. Maybe a prank left behind by someone who worked here before. But something about it unsettled me. Just a piece of paper, I muttered to myself. Nothing more. I shoved it into my pocket and got to work. But the longer I cleaned, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was like the building had eyes, like it was alive in some way. But no one was here. There was just me and the silence. I worked my way down the hall, mop dragging behind me, until I heard it. A faint whisper. I froze. It came from the bathroom. I told myself it was nothing. Just the wind, or maybe the pipes, making strange noises. But I couldn't shake the chill that crept up my spine. I had to check. I walked slowly toward the bathroom door, my heart pounding. The whispering was louder now, more distinct, like voices speaking in a low, hurried conversation. I pushed the door open. Empty. The mirrors were fogged, and the air was damp. No one was there. But the whispering didn't stop. It felt like it was coming from inside my own head. It was almost like they were calling me. I stepped back, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. That's when I remembered the list. Rule number 2. If you hear whispering in the bathroom, leave immediately. I swallowed hard. I should have left. I should have turned and walked away right then. But instead, I stayed. I couldn't explain why. Something in me wanted to stay, to understand it. I turned around to leave, and that's when I saw him. A figure, sitting in the break room at the end of the hall. He was facing away from me, his head tilted down like he was reading something. I couldn't see his face, but something about him felt wrong. I knew I shouldn't approach him, but I couldn't resist. I was drawn to him, like a moth to a flame. I walked toward him, slowly, my steps echoing through the empty hallway. As I got closer, I felt the temperature drop. It was like the air itself was turning cold, thick with an unseen presence. I reached the break room door. The man lifted his head. His face wasn't blurry like I expected. It was wrong. His eyes were too wide, his lips twisted into an unsettling grin. He didn't say a word, just stared at me as if he knew something I didn't. I stumbled back, my pulse racing. I wanted to turn and run, but my body wouldn't obey. Something held me there, trapped. The whispering from the bathroom grew louder. And then the lights went out. Pitch black. I heard the door to the break room creak open. Then the whispering stopped. I should have been terrified. I should have fled. But I couldn't. Instead, I stood there, frozen, as the weight of the darkness pressed down on me. I don't know how long I stood there, trapped in that silence. But eventually, the lights flickered back on, and the break room door was shut. The man was gone. I looked around, but there was no sign of him. Nothing. Like he'd never been there at all. I felt dizzy, my thoughts racing. Had I imagined it? Or was it something else? Something worse? I turned to leave. I didn't want to be here anymore. But then I saw it. The same list of rules, crumpled and torn, was sitting on the floor right in front of me. Rules to follow, read carefully. And just like that, I understood. The building wasn't just old. It was hungry. It wanted something from you. If you stayed too long, if you broke the rules, you became part of it. I could feel it now, the weight of it crawling under my skin. Something was watching me. Something knew I had broken the rules. I turned to leave, my hands trembling, but as I walked out the door, I couldn't help but feel like I was being followed. And as I stepped out into the cool night air, I saw it, the reflection of myself, standing by the door. But I wasn't moving. It wasn't me. I ran, but it was too late. Now, the rules wait for the next poor soul, the next new janitor who will find them, read them, and fall into the same trap I did. And I'll be here, watching, just like the building always does.